question on everybody's lips is, can you dunk the world's largest chocolate hobnob? No, unfortunately you cannot. Did a quick Google search on this one, and I'm 99.999% sure this is actually the world's largest hobnob. I don't think anyone has ever made a larger one. There's one that's been made which is about 8 inches in diameter. Mine is 9 and about as thick as your forearm, so it is next level large. But why make the world's largest chocolate hobnob? Well, to be honest, it's just because I'm a big Chocky Bicky fan. I absolutely love them. Dunked in tea, dry on their own, either or. So that's the why. Now it's just the how. And the how is quite simple, to be honest with you. Get all your dry bits together. So for me it was 600 grams of oats, 400 grams of flour, 10 grams of bicarb and 5 grams of salt. Put that in a big old sort of plastic bowl or mixing container. Do the best you can without spilling it all over your side to combine it all together. Get yourself a bigger bowl if necessary. Then separately in a pan I mixed on heat 300 grams of butter, 250 grams of brown sugar, 250 grams of golden syrup. Got that all homogenized. Then brought it back, put the dry and the hot wet together, put it into a bowl, mix them together, get a rather large tin or a smaller one if you're making normal ones, and press firmly the mixture into the bottom of it, like so. And just to make sure it is extra firmly pressed, grab yourself a little spatula and press down more. Bang her in the oven and out it comes about half an hour later. Nice and golden brown and biscuit, lovely. And to be fair my friends, that is how you make an extra large hobnob. Obviously you peel off the foil and get it all prepped, but that's him done. And here's some normal size ones that I did alongside it, just so you can compare the sort of astronomicalness of our big one. But obviously we're not here for rudimentary normal hobnobs. We only deal in the best, and the best obviously is chocolate covered. So we got ourselves a steaming boiling pan of water, put a plastic bowl over the top, also known as a bain-marie, and put about 400 grams of chocolate inside it. Whisk that until it was melted and smooth, and then placed it over our golden brown hobnob. Pushed it around a bit with a spatula to make sure that obviously it's got a good thick coverage. Made a little funky pattern, and then fortunately we had a little bit left to have some of our smaller, still larger than a normal hobnob, sized biscuits covered as well. Now obviously I set them to cool, but once they were cool, obviously the best thing about a biscuit ever is to dunk it in a cup of tea and go nuts with it there, which obviously the smaller ones were, almost capable of, but this giant fella was never going anywhere near it. So I found an innovative way of doing it. We do chocolate hobnob slices, which dunk effectively very well. Now I'm not here to start a giant debate on which biscuit is the best dunker, because obviously everyone's going to have a difference of opinion. Mine, however, now is quite simply a giant hobnob cut into slices. It seems absolutely perfect. And I'm not tooting my own trumpet here, but honestly homemade biscuits dunked in tea is phenomenal. I mean, the flavour on that Chocky hobnob was unparalleled. But thank you very much for watching. This is me just obviously having a quick clean up before I get out of the kitchen. So if you have a favourite biscuit or something you want to see, just let me know, because making things bigger than they should be is now my new favourite hobby. Next week is Donut Week 2.0. Come and have a browse. This is my French fancy, obviously supersized for the giant eats. Obviously not the one that was on the left, it was the big one on the right there. I did a bit of research on how to make this supersized, and it does just take 180 grams of butter, 180 grams of flour, 180 grams of caster sugar, 6 large free-ranged eggs, some vanilla, a spot of salt and a dash of milk. So obviously we will start with the 180 grams of butter and 180 grams of flour. Now it does say to melt and cool the butter before mixing them together, but due to skipping that step, the brand new whisk that I have just bought just doesn't cut the mustard. So we stick our hands in and we get a bit messy, and then go in with the spoon. Next, what you're going to do is beat in 6 large free-range eggs in a particularly time-consuming one at a time and mix in between method. Give the new whisk another try, which I didn't really quite fancy, so let's throw that away and stick with our trusty little metal whisk. Give a little tidy up, and then obviously it's time for a heavy splash of vanilla. quick mix to make sure that's all combined, and then we go in with 180 grams of self-raising flour. Now obviously if you do look at a proper recipe, it will say 180 grams of plain flour plus some baking soda, but that to me just seems pointless, so self-raising flour seems to be the one. Now what you want to do is not necessarily mix like you did with the butter and the sugar, but you want to fold over, and this creates a certain level of air to make your cake nice and fluffy. Preset your oven, heat it up to 180 degrees, that is Celsius and fan assisted, so I'm sure it'll be a little bit more. If you're not fan assisted, then you want to add a little bit of liquid to the cake and the baker, coffee and milk respectively. You then want to put the batter inside the cake tin and bang that straight into the oven. Moving on to our buttercream, which is an excessive amount of unsalted British butter and an excessive amount of ice and sugar. Now obviously the sieve does like to keep hold of the ice and sugar, especially if you don't dry it properly, so get right in there busy with the spoon. And once again you're going to go in with the hands, getting it messy, causing little fireworks of ice and sugar over your counter, and slowly sort of combine those together to a point where it is soft enough that you can go in with a spoon, add a solid dash of vanilla and some milk to soften it up. And now you're really going to need to work. I mean, this whisking probably gives you an arm ache. You need to pull up the bowl to the side to add a bit of leverage, bang it out and have a little baker's taste. Make sure it's all good. Obviously wipe the side down now, and fortunately the cake is now done. So what we want to do is not know what to do with the utensils. Put it on a plate, take it off the plate, put it on a cooling rack in the back, re-butter up the pan again, and add the second half of the mixture. Now I will say it's not quite half. We did go a little bit over in the first time, so this one is a little bit smaller, as you can see now, because obviously I've edited out the waiting time and the cake is done. We get ourselves a gingerbread man's shaped chopping board and start cutting this down into a squarish shape. Have a look at the inside, see, nice and fluffy. We take off the spare sides, and obviously don't worry because none of it goes to waste. So now we have two squarish forms of cake, and if we add two tiny more little slivers, we have a solid cake cube. Add the buttercream in. Now I did think obviously just sponge and buttercream may be a little bit too much, so I added in some strawberry jam to make it a bit more like a vanilla sponge, but it does add a certain level of fruity flavour which you just don't get with buttercream and vanilla sponge, so it might be deemed as a childish palate, but there we go, we've added it in. But we do have a solid cake cube now, which is, you know, exactly what's desired. Now obviously what we do normally get with a French fancy, the kind of pièce de résistance, and probably the only bit that's actually worth eating, is a mound of buttercream on the top. What we're going to do as well is add a load of buttercream on the outside so it doesn't get so dry, keeps a lovely moist texture, and then move on to the dreaded fondant. And I'll be honest, the fondant didn't really work out too well for me at all, but I will talk you through that in a minute. So first of all, what you do is steal your mum's rolling pin, roll it vigorously to the counter to the point where it sticks on there and you do struggle to get it off. Give it an extra wipe to hopefully alleviate some stickiness, and add the pink food colouring gel. You want to roll that around and beat it up a little bit until it has quite a uniform pink colour, and then get back to the rolling and try and get a big old square. Not forgetting to add a bit more flour so obviously we don't get a repeat of that sticky situation, and a tip, flour the rolling pin as well. That does actually seem to help. Now this is where we went wrong, the bit that I was telling you about before, is that I didn't actually have the cake to hand. At this point I should have just chucked it on and been done with it, but because the cake was elsewhere I thought I'd fold it over, put it to the side, bring the cake in, unfold it, and then put it over. But naturally, because it is thin and floury, and however I had a bit of a tearing issue unfolding it. So I tried to rectify the tear by squishing it back together, but it wasn't re-gluing itself, so I added a bit of water, but obviously then it got too wet, and it just, you know, I ended up in a right bit of a pickle, if I'm being brutally honest with you. So we re-flour the side, we start re-rolling it once again, try and get it to shape for the cake, which is now perfectly placed right next to it. Naturally, the fondant is a bit fragile, and so is my patience, really. But we move on. So we managed to pick it up, unstuck from the side, and just throw it on. Naturally, we get another tear, but our cake is now finally dressed. It may not be the fanciest cake you've ever seen, especially not really a French fancy. It's more like a, well, we'll just call it a large pink French. But we do now have a fully dressed pink cube of a cake, and the only thing left to make it look like a bit of a French fancy is the ice and sugar lines across the top. This is now another problem which we do face. We did run out of ice and sugar. We then had to go to the shop and go get some more ice and sugar. Mix that up. It still isn't the right consistency, so I thought let's just stick it in the fridge for a while, bring it out, and now this is the first time we're using a piping bag ever. Thought it was just as simple as putting the icing in the piping bag and then sticking this plastic cone in the end, bringing the cake over, snipping the little end off and pouring it over. But as you can see, obviously the cone then fell off. It had a bit of a nightmare. The icing sugar isn't thick enough as it is, but there is ice and sugar dripping down it, and it is pink, and it is a large square. So for me, I think that's pretty fancy going on. Let's give it away. It is 1.2 kilograms, just under. I did double check, but a normal Mr. Kipling French Fancy weighs around 28 grams, so we're about or just under 43 times the mass of that one. Now, it doesn't look the fanciest, but believe me, as the only person who's actually tried it, it does taste blooming good. So I'm not going to stop here, and I will be back next Saturday to show you what I've baked next. The hot cross bun. We've had our Easter egg style chocolatey number with the supersized cream egg. If you haven't seen that, click on the channel, go over there, have a quick browse. But what I have got now is a hot cross bun. Never been a massive fan of them. Well, I wasn't when I was younger. I do seem to prefer them a little bit more now I am getting on a bit. But this is me making a massive one. So like most baking, it is just about mixing all of the dry ingredients together and then putting it with the wet. So I use 600 grams of strong white bread flour, 90 grams of caster sugar, 10 grams of salt, 10 grams of instant yeast, a healthy teaspoon of sweet cinnamon powder, 2 teaspoons or 2 and a bit of love of mixed spice, and the zest of a big old juicy orange. So then we move on over to the wet, which is 250 millilitres of warm milk and 80 grams of softened butter. I thought I'd probably save a little bit of time and effort here with my hard butter, waiting for it to soften up. I thought I'd just chuck it into the milk whilst that's warming up so it softens all together. Got 2 large free-range eggs, cracked those into the wet mixture, and then poured the buttery, milky goodness on top, and then just got with mixing, got with kneading. At this point, I will tell you, it smells stunning. At this stage, and for the most of the hot cross bun, the only thing left to add is 250 grams of raisins, sultanas, currants, whatever you have. I mean, I'm sure many other dried fruits will work just the same, whether you use cranberries or however, but traditionally we are using raisins. So once you've mixed in the 250 grams, I then just transfer it into an oiled bowl. This is to allow it to proof. After about 60 to 90 minutes of proofing, it has doubled in size. It'll probably be significantly less if you're not making the same sort of Goliath. You then just want to shape it into its sort of loaf shape or a ball. Then grab a baking paper lined tin or a Dutch oven or something along those lines. Put it in there and then make up the paste for the cross on top. Now the cross on top, weirdly enough, is just plain flour and water, roughly equal parts of each. I used 80 grams of plain flour and 80 millilitres of water. Whisked those together until it becomes, well, you know, the paste. And then just make a cross on the top of the on the bun. Otherwise it would just be a hot bun. Now it's a hot cross bun. So I grabbed my trusty spoon and delicately let the artist flow straight through me before preheating my oven to about 160 degrees on a fan assisted. Maybe a bit hotter, maybe different if you're making a normal sized one, so feel free to look that up by yourself. Now whilst that is doing its thing in the oven, little did I know you have to glaze a hot cross bun using apricot jam. So let's just make that smooth, whisk that up in a bowl before grabbing a pastry brush, or in my case a trusty spoon, and glazing it over the top. Obviously completely ignoring the fact that I just dropped 101 raisins on the floor and over the counter. So pick them up, glaze the hot cross bun, and then literally just leave that glaze to soak in for about half an hour to 40 minutes, or until your stomach tells you that you have to stop leaving it. Which, I'll be honest, in my case wasn't very long at all. So grab yourself a bread knife, grab yourself a nice hunky chunk of butter, salted preferably, and then enjoy, quite simply. I mean, mine is absolutely huge, as you can tell. I'll be brutally honest with you guys, I did completely forget to weigh it, so I do apologise, but it is massive. I mean, it fills a dinner plate. It's warm, it's spicy, there's raisins throughout it. It is 100% a hot cross bun, and even though I thought it was quite weird, the apricot jam proper finishes that off nicely. And because I forgot to weigh it, here's a shot of it next to a cup of tea. So it's a Saturday and I'm back making monsters in the kitchen. Following how well the croissant come out of the oven, I thought I'd stick with a pastry theme and go after the nation's heart and drop in a big old sausage roll. Now, puff pastry is quite similar to the pastry that we did make with the croissant, so fortunately I've got a tiny bit of experience here. It is a big old butter block encased in dough to get some layers to create that puff. Obviously, first of all, we do start with an astronomical 1,050 grams, so just over a kilo of unsalted British butter. We put that in with 100 grams of flour just to keep it all steady to create the block. Bang that in the fridge to chill, and then quickly move on to the dough, because obviously the video is running away without me. Learning from our mistakes, we do remember our sieve and sift 1.8 kilograms of strong white bread flour into a bowl, add 36 grams of table salt, and then it's just water and butter for the liquid. So it is 900 milliliters of water, which I've decided to do sort of in sections, just so I don't get a big old pond on my counter. And then 320 grams of melted and cooled butter, which I actually did that step this time. Then create a shaggy dough inside the bowl and bang it on a floured surface just to give it a small kneading. You don't want to go too crazy. Flour up the rolling pin and roll it out into a big old square. Then the usual trick with pastry, you want to find a tray, pop it on that, baking paper, cling film, bang it in the fridge to chill. This time around we do have some bits and bobs to be getting on with whilst everything's chilling in the fridge. So grab yourself 2 small red onions, de-skin them, dice them, melt some butter in a frying pan, and once the butter's all melted down, just bung them in. Now we are just swishing these around on a very low heat. You don't want to brown them at all, just get them translucent. When they're done, put them in a bowl and leave them to chill, because they need to cool thoroughly before you put them in the sausage meat. Back to the dough, roll it out to put the butter in, and yeah, very similar trick to the croissant here. You put the butter block down, encase it with the pastry by folding it over like an envelope, press down on it because naturally the butter is quite hard, give it a quick roll and fold it into thirds. Then as per usual, what we're going to do is find a tray, grab some baking paper, wrap it in that, have a little fight with the cling film whilst you're trying to wrap it, and as per usual, pop it in the fridge to chill. Then we move on to the apple part of the sage and apple sausage meat filling for the sausage roll. Now this bit is quite easy, I mean fairly messy, but it is quite easy. Just grab 3 eating apples. The recipe that I'm supersizing right now does specify not to use cooking apples, so I chose 3 fairly humble royal galas. We de-skin, core, quarter and grate the apples before giving them a big squeeze, get most of the moisture mixture out and pop them in a bowl ready for the sausage meat. It is a bit of a shame about the wasted juice, if I'm honest. I didn't quite realise how much would come out. But onto the meat log now. So we've got 100 grams of 20% fat pork mince with our 3 grated humble royal galas, our now cooled diced red onions, 2 eggs, 90 grams of breadcrumbs, 4 fairly hefty teaspoons of dried sage, some salt and pepper, and a quick mix before we bang that onto some baking paper, make a good log shape, wrap it up and put it in the fridge to chill. Now obviously it is back to pastry time. We have to roll it out into a big old rectangle and fold it into thirds 3 more times before we can do anything with it. It's exactly the same as the croissant. 4 seems to be the magic number for amount of layers plus the structural integrity of the pastry itself. Now some of you may be thinking, God, that's a lot of pastry for the amount of sausage roll log that you've made, and those people would be absolutely bang on the money. Half of this is gonna go forward to next week's video. Look at me being smart, making 2 in one day, getting ahead of myself. So, spoiler alert, but next week there is another puff pastry monster for you to watch me create. But back to the task in hand. Let's flatten this fella out and get our apple and sage sausage meat inside. Using egg wash as a bit of food glue here. It's just beaten eggs and milk. I then pull the, lid over, give it a solid trim down all 3 sides. Squish the long side down with a fork to give it that sort of bohemian bakery sort of style. Put it into baking paper, wrap it up in some cling film and put that to chill for at least half an hour before we seize the oven. And speaking of oven, you want to preheat that to sort of a high temperature. So when it does come out, it is just prepping him for the oven, which is getting the trusty spoon out because I still don't have a pastry brush. Giving him an egg wash, which is just egg and milk. A light scoring over the top and then a sprinkle of mountain sea salt. Now after struggling to fit him into my standard household oven, he is a bit squished, but we do now have a fully cooked, steaming 2.7 kilogram sage and apple sausage roll. And that is 27 times the lunchtime power that a standard sausage roll is going to give you. And it can literally barely fit on my chopping board. The fact that you're seeing an oversized cheese twist steaming on my chopping board must mean that it's a Saturday, and that means that I'm back making monsters in the kitchen. So obviously if you've seen the sausage roll video last time, you will know, as a little spoiler for you, that it is another puff pastry video. Now obviously also if you have seen the video, which means that you've seen me make this puff pastry, so I have sped it up for you. It will go by very quickly, but for those that haven't, a very quick recap. What's going on in front of you is 1.8 kilograms of strong white bread flour, which is then mixed with 36 grams of fine salt, 360 grams of unsalted butter, which has been melted and then cooled, plus 900 milliliters of cold water. That's then mixed up in a bowl, kneaded out on the table, put into a rectangle, rolled, etc. Put into the fridge to chill, combined then with a 1.2-ish, I think, kilo block of butter, which we then flattened, put in the middle of that dough, and then obviously rolled, folded, chilled, rolled, folded, chilled, rolled, folded, chilled, one more time, rolled, folded, and then chilled, which leads us to this point right here. Chuck in a cheeky cutscene because I love the logo, and you get to know that it's a completely different video, which drops us off at the other side of my kitchen, where we are on a chopping board cutting cheese, probably my favourite pastime in the whole world. Then strenuously grating, I think, 650 or 750 grams of cheese, obviously by hand, because, you know, this videos are labour intensive. But we do have like a 50-50 mix, probably the 2 best cheeses in the world. We've got ourselves some red Leicester and we've got ourselves some mature cheddar. And yeah, I mean, there's not really a great deal to say here, if I'm brutally honest with you. We grate it up and we chuck it in the bowl. So I guess all we can do at the minute is enjoy my aloe vera plant, which is growing pretty well. And if anyone is wondering, the bowl of cheese isn't steaming there. I am actually making a 3rd video. It's a short, which would have been out by now, where I'm just making some red onion chutney. to be honest. It was absolutely delicious, but it accompanied this cheesy number absolutely marvellously. But what you see us adding now is garlic granules, sage, pepper, can't quite remember if there's salt in it, but we give it a little mix up, and obviously we're now back to flour in a rolling pin dealing with pastry. Now fortunately there is no sort of roll, fold and chill. That is all done. That step's been completed, so we are just rolling it out to size as big as we could physically get the cheese twists, whilst obviously taking into consideration how big my oven is. You do need to egg wash the inside of a cheese twist, which I thought quite peculiar, but hey, I don't make these ingenious recipes. I just copy them and supersize them, make them possibly as big as I can do. Obviously, once again, third video in a row now, we still do not have a pastry brush, so we're back again with the trusty spoon, putting our cheese mixture onto our now egg washed pastry with a little say special surprise, but just to add a tinsy bit more flavour, I've got some whole grain mustard which I smooth down the middle of the cheese twist, and then obviously cover that in cheese. Also, it is quite easy, a cheese twist, I won't lie to you, so it will be a nice little short video for you to watch. So let's make sure we cover that mustard with the last bit of cheese we've got, make sure it's all level, and fold this fella over. Yeah, we now need to just cut it into shape, give her the old, well, the twist, otherwise it would just be a cheese pastry, I guess. Just quick roll it down though first, just to make sure it's all sort of uniform, and then, as I say, cut it into shape. Fortunately, for me, obviously, I do need to make sure it fits inside the oven, hence why I take off so much, but it does just mean I've got more cheese twists for my money. Give them a good old twirl, get them into that shape, and naturally wrap one and pop it into my freezer alongside, naturally, the rather vast growing collection of oversized pastry, I don't know, delicacies. I'm kind of running out of space for normal food in there at the minute. It's getting quite hectic. Naturally, I do not have a tray long enough for this to stay long, so it is in a horseshoe shape. Quick egg wash, bang it in the oven on high, that's a fan assisted 200 for 20 to 25 minutes, and it comes out perfectly steaming. Obviously we're going to have a bit of trouble taking it off the tray, so we use the classic well-known 2 spatula and tongue method to lift it up, and look at it, they're all beautiful. So take them over to the other side, give them a little poke to show you how actual crunchy and flaky this pastry is. Honestly, it was something else. And now let's have a little slice. Try it out with the aforementioned red onion chutney. And I'll be honest with you, this was absolutely stunning. It was probably, it is so far the best thing that I've done. But as a cheese lover, I would say that. But it was bloody stunning. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love a pint. Love a pint, and specifically I love a Guinness. And one of the things that I do absolutely adore about a Guinness is the fact that, you know, one, it's a fantastic creamy pint, and two, it goes incredibly well with beef. So I've been tossing up the idea of doing a beef or steak and Guinness pie for a while. Obviously it is the summertime, so pies are a little bit more winter food, so I decided to go for the humble pasty. And considering a Cornish pasty or a Cornish-esque pasty had been on my radar for a while, it seemed a very good time to sort of combine both ideas and whop out something special. So what you find yourself watching now is my Guinness and beef short rib pasty, which, as something specials go, does get right up there. So the beef and the Guinness are now firmly sat on the subs bench, because before all else you do need to make the pastry that goes around the pasty. Now I don't know if you've seen the cheese twist or if you've seen the sausage roll video that I did. These are quite similar. It is just a fairly rough puff pastry, so it's a ton of flour, a bit of salt, some cold water, put that into a rough dough, add well, I did 250 grams, so equal parts butter to flour. Fold that into the dough, leave invisible chunks, and then just roll it out. Fold into thirds, roll it out, fold into thirds, roll it out, fold into thirds. 4 is the magic number. And then obviously what we do is we wrap it up and put it into chill whilst we get busy with the filling. So about half an hour I'm meant to be chilling this for, but you can leave it for anywhere up to about 3 days. But obviously this is one of my videos, so one of my videos wouldn't be exactly right without a good amount of hiccups. So believe the fact that along the way we do have some problems. Beef short rib time makes an entrance. So I went to the butcher's, got some beef short rib and trimmed them down off the bone as much as I can to try and get some sort of uniform chunks. It does say between 2 and 3 centimeters, but I don't know if you've ever really chunked up beef short rib yourself. Sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. So we do have an array of chunks, which do need browning and seasoning before any sort of pasty combination comes involved. So for the seasoning, it's quite simply a couple of tablespoons of flour, salt and pepper, smoked paprika and some garlic powder. Then have a bit of warmed olive oil in a pan, and in batches, because you don't want to crowd it too much, slightly brown. Get some nice browning on those chunks of short rib. I will tell you now that the flavour at the end on this pasty was absolutely incredible, and it all starts here at the browning stage. I mean, you will get fond on the bottom of this pan, so the brown sort of stick to the bottom of the pan stuff there, which you can partially see as you brown more short rib, and then as you bring in the veggies and the other bits and bobs which then go inside the pasty, that fond just creates one of the most insanely deep, rich and velvety flavours. It is sort of vital, so don't go scratching. If you are going to copy this, don't go scratching that off and cleaning the pan in between. Make sure you do use that one pan uniformed throughout the entire thing. So I've got myself a new word. I have found a new word, and the next thing that we add to this is, and forgive me if I do butcher this, mirepoix or mirepoix. It is the sort of foundation for almost every sort of soup or braising flavours, which quite simply is 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, 1 part carrot. Now obviously if you are part of the cooking world, or if you're big into the cooking, naturally you know that already, but I didn't, so every day's a learning day, that's what they say. Now, from what I understand, a mirepoix is meant to be diced, but so obviously mine is quite chunky. It's going to be chunky naturally due to the end size of the product, and obviously I want some substantial sort of filling, or not almost crunch, but some sort of texture to it at the end. I don't just want it to be like a thick soup paste, if that makes sense. So you get your mirepoix, you chop it up, your carrots, your celery, your onions, and then add that to the pan with the fond on the bottom. Obviously we've set our browned short rib aside now, and we're going to cook this off for 5 to 7 minutes, and then you want to add your other flavours. So I am loosely or roughly dicing up a whole garlic bulb and 2 giant portobello mushrooms, because obviously beef and mushroom is flavour of the gods, and with, you know, Guinness, the nectar of the gods, I mean you can't really go wrong there, can you? So once they're chopped up, diced up, you know, hacked up, however you want to do it, just add them to the onions, the carrot, the celery, the fond, and let them cook off for another 3 to 4 minutes whilst I boil the kettle and make up some beef stock. Now obviously this is a cheater's beef stock. I'm not going to go out of my way to get all of the bones, etc. I mean, I'm not a restaurant and I enjoyed it either way, so I just got a standard Knorr, I think it is, beef stock from the shop, put it in some hot water, whisk that up together like so. I then left this to cool on the side for a few minutes. It isn't typically necessary, it's just obviously I had a bit of time whilst everything was sort of cooking off in the pan, so I decided to do this ahead of time. Now we move on to building some flavour in the filling. So get yourself a tablespoon and a half of tomato paste, add that to your mixture, cook it off for a minute and a half, and then crack open a chilled can of the black stuff. Now, I don't know if it's actually necessary because it did end up sort of fizzing up when you added it to the pan anyway. But I let the black stuff, the Guinness, settle before adding it to and deglazing the pan. And by deglazing, if you didn't know, I mean adding it in and then scraping all of that fond off the bottom and mixing it into the liquid which you now have. After the deglazing of the pan and letting the liquid settle, I did just let it sort of sit and bubble for a minute, because obviously as much as you want as much of the Guinness flavour as possible, you don't really want an overbearing sort of alcohol taste. Once you've done that, add the pre-made beef stock and a few good dashes of the one and only Liam Perrin's Worcester sauce, and then back to the pan we put the browned short rib. I have now acquired a couple of green fingers and got a thyme and a rosemary plant rather than using the dried seasoning all the time. So I've plucked a healthy amount of both and added that to the pot, which we now need to leave to simmer for a good hour to 90 minutes. One, to obviously reduce the liquid down to something which is thick and glossy, but two, you also need to make that short rib as tender as possible. So in the meantime, I peeled and cubed is probably more apt, some potatoes, the final sort of piece of the pasty puzzle, and that's so obviously it adds a bit of texture, a bit of filling. So our sort of dense pasty filling is complete. It has simmered for an hour or two, and we need to leave that to cool entirely, mark my words, entirely, before we add it to the pastry. Now this is purely because if you add it too hot, much like I'm doing currently, what it will do is weaken the structure of the pastry which you've had in the fridge. So naturally what you don't think about is the pastry is made up of pretty much 45 to 50% butter. So obviously if you add in some hot filling, that is going to melt the butter, completely weakening the pastry itself. So if you do what I did and add it too warm, you will have to then make a new batch of pastry. So don't do what I did, try and do it right the first time, don't try and cut corners, because inevitably it does take longer in the long run, because now I have to make some new pastry and let that chill thoroughly for half an hour. On the plus side, I know that when I do return to it, that the filling is completely cooled, and I did somehow make an absolute hack of making a new rough puff pastry, which is fantastic, and doing it all sort of like in one hit. I don't know if you just saw that, it was a bit magic. It went past really quick because obviously that's how efficient the hack is. So that went to chill, that then come out of chill a good half an hour to an hour later. Now, as I say, it is completely cooled, my filling, so let's roll this back out and use a smarter technique where we don't have to lift the pastry off, where we slide a pan or a tray underneath the pastry, put it on there, and then fold it over, because this seems a lot smarter. See, there's hacks coming out absolutely everywhere in this. Also, duly noted, the trusty spoon is gone, because I've managed to purchase myself a pastry brush. And with said pastry brush, I wet down the sides just to sort of secure the crimp of the pasty a little bit better. Egg wash this fella up. Egg wash is quite simply 2 eggs and a little bit of milk, and then score some steam vents in the top. This fella is now ready for 170 degrees for 2 hours, and bam, we got ourselves a golden brown pasty. At this point, as I'm sure returning viewers would know, I do normally weigh the creation to show you exactly how heavy it was, but I was starving due to a technical error with the pastry and not being able to cook anything whilst this was doing its thing. So I decided we were having this for dinner, which was not a bad choice. So I quickly rustled up a few sauteed potatoes from the potatoes which I over chopped earlier to fit into the pie, wazzed a bit of gravy together, and I'll be honest, it was something magical. See, seasoned sauteed potatoes, poured myself a fresh Guinness, because obviously what dinner is not complete without a Guinness pie and more Guinness to accompany it, bit of gravy over the top, and whop, straight in the gob. So I'll say thanks for the watch now, whilst I go and deal with a blister on the roof of my mouth. It's another Saturday and I'm back creating monsters in the kitchen. This time, however, I do have something truly amazing for you, as you've just seen. So incorporating strong white bread flour, caster sugar, salt, yeast, whole milk, water, 2 tons of butter, plain flour, some egg wash, and 4 days of my life, I give you the giant croissant. Today I am starting with 1.5 kilos of strong white bread flour, putting that in the bowl, forgetting that I do need to sift out the lumps, putting it back in the flour bag, grabbing the sieve, and then successfully sieving it into the bowl until you do get 1.5 kilos of big fluffy white mountain inside a bowl. Caster sugar, which is 180 grams of which doesn't actually sound like a lot in comparison to the flour, but then just making sure that's combined enough in the bowl. We then go with 36 grams of yeast, which is annoying because they come in 11 gram little sachets, so we need 3 of those, and then just a sprinkle of the next one. Coming in strong with 36 equally grams of salt. I am just using standard table salt. I'm sure there is some other salt that you're meant to be using. I'm then coming in with 150 grams of unsalted butter, which is chopped up into little cubes, and once again I have skipped the melted and cooled step, which doesn't really come as a massive problem, although the croissant connoisseurs out there will probably be absolutely quaking in their boots. We then add in our milk, which is 900 millilitres of which as you saw, does completely fill up the bowl. We're then going to get our hands absolutely disgusting, mixing that up inside the plastic bowl, realising that it's probably easier just to put it out on the side. Doing exactly that, kneading it for a few minutes, then ironically putting it back in the same bowl, just this time with a fair bit of olive oil in it, and that's so it can grow, and obviously struggle to get it off my hand whilst trying to do so. Now you want to cling film over the top of the bowl and leave it until it is about doubled in size, which is actually kind of eerie when you think about it, that it does do that. But anyway, it's how you make a croissant. So we pour it out, and then we need to essentially just roll this gently into a rectangle so we can wrap it tight, chill it for a couple of hours so it slightly firms up, so it is ready for the butter, and then obviously the long lamination process. And feel free to waste a little bit of time like I do, trying to square it off perfectly, thinking that it's not going to misshape when you try and put it inside a tray. Leading to the next somewhat dilemma, which is trying to find a tray that's going to fit this massive bit of dough inside it. So we end up using a grill pan, wrapping it tightly with foil and baking paper, and then obviously cling film over the top so it can go in the fridge and chill for a couple of hours. Next, we're on to the butter block, or beurrage as it does say it's called. There's not really much to say here. It is quite simple. It's 900 grams, so just shy of a kilo of unsalted British butter, 90 grams of plain flour. Put those together and somehow make it into a rectangle. It doesn't sound like a lot, but believe me, this is strenuous work going on here and incredibly time consuming. If I'm honest with you, it also makes your hands feel pretty gross, but there we go. It's part and parcel of the giant croissant. Nearing the end of our stint of just having fun and playing around with a big old block of butter, we do need to find a tray, wrap that up, and then equally chill. Now fortunately I have saved you the graft of waiting around for an excessive amount of time for everything to cool down. This step is quite simple, however. We quite simply put the butter inside the dough, fold the dough over like an envelope, and believe it or not, back in the fridge to chill. We are now back out of the fridge, chilled enough, and the task here, quite simply, as a uniform piece of dough and butter, is to roll it into a big rectangle and then fold it into thirds. Now this creates an amazing amount of layers. I'm not going to try and bore you to watch it all, but each time we do this, which is about 4 times, you do then have to pop it back in the fridge to chill. It is excessively time consuming. Obviously, if you feel like you have the effort, feel free to try and square it off pointlessly before popping it back into the tray, clinging it, and once again popping it back in the fridge. And lo and behold, we are back out of the fridge. Honestly, I don't know if you've been watching, but you'll never guess what we're about to do now. Oh, you got it, well done. Fold it into thirds after rolling it back out. And quickly do it once again, but I'm sure you will be over the moon to learn that this is our last one to do it. Apparently you can't really do it more than 4 or 5 times. It comes too many layers and the structure inside doesn't seem to hold up too well. Then what we do, believe it or not, is put it back in the fridge, but we do this overnight, and as you can see, it is absolutely ginormous and ready for a big old rolling session. So you want to make sure you're getting a good amount of flour down on the surface. Press it down before rolling, as a good few people have said to do. And for any of those eagle-eyed viewers that are watching the previous video out there, may have realised that we do actually have our own rolling pin now. So we did give our mum back the one that we stole. Gonna get out the trusty pizza cutter to cut these into triangle shapes. Now it is rolled out into a good size, and press the top down, try and stretch it out, which doesn't really work because obviously we've overfloured the surface, so there's nothing for it to stick to. But we're just going to try and roll it up into the nice croissant shape that we all know and love. Obviously it's not going to be tight enough, so I am going to bring it back out and re-roll it because it was just really loose, and loose croissants just aren't really the kind of benchmark we're looking to set here at Food for Giants. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a tiny slit at the base of the croissant as we re-roll it back up. Not entirely sure what this is for, if I'm honest with you. I did watch a Babish video, and let's be fair, that guy clearly knows what he's doing around the kitchen. We just kind of copied him. I'm assuming it's something to do with cooking the inside correctly and there not being too much croissant in the middle. But we move on. We've got all three of our croissants now rolled into shape. One of them cling filmed and bagged and popped into the freezer so I can thoroughly enjoy it at a later date. And the other two ready to hit the egg wash shower. Now the egg wash is simple enough. Just beat together 2 eggs, a little bit of milk. I'll put some salt and a bit of sugar in there. And then, because obviously we don't have a pastry brush and you know my mother wasn't around to steal anything from, we are just using the back of a spoon and learning that a spoon is a fairly universal utensil as it goes. As universal it may be, unfortunately it isn't a pastry brush, and it does take me absolutely forever to coat these in the egg wash, but we do get it done eventually, and we can pop these in the oven, which has been preheated to 180 degrees, and that's fan assisted. Because of the size of them, after about 30 minutes we did have to lower it down to 160 just so obviously the middle can cook and doesn't brown on the outside too much. But they are done. 4 days later, after starting this on a Saturday and then rushing home on a Tuesday after work to bake them and finish them off before the dough spoiled. I do have three if you count the one in the freezer, excessively large croissants. I mean, they are absolute monsters. And of course we do give them away. I think they weigh just shy of 1.2 kilograms each, which after a brief Google search and finding out that the average croissant weighs 50 grams, that is 24 times the intensity of your normal shop bought croissant. But that is me now done for another week, so I'm going to try and find something to do with these large croissants. And it's donut time. Nutella donut time to be precise. Absolutely love a little donut if I'm being honest with you. Could have done jam, I could have done custard, but obviously chocolate was the way forward. So I got a massive jar of Nutella and I thought, let's get at it. So how do you make donuts? How do you make a giant donut? Let me show you. Carefully, actually, is the right answer, because you have to fry it in quite a hefty amount of oil, so very carefully. So hard hats and health and safety briefings aside, what I use to make my donut dough is 850 grams of strong white bread flour, 100 grams of sugar, 12 grams of salt, 14 grams of instant yeast, 4 large free-range eggs, 320 millilitres of warmed milk, and 120 grams of softened butter, which I'm now not going to soften my butter because I've recently found the best way of doing this is to just chop up hard butter and then put it in the warming milk on the pan. Seems to save a bit of time, and obviously I do feel nice and innovative, so yeah. Then to make a donut dough, much like 90% of the doughs on the planet, you get all of the dry ingredients together and then put it with the eggs and the wet ingredients. Mix that up and then leave that to rise for an annoyingly long amount of time. But whilst it is proofing, obviously you can get with making the mixture in the middle. In this case, Nutella. Now obviously just having Nutella in the middle of the donut may have been a bit claggy, a bit, you know, not quite there. So I made a Nutella ganache, which was unsurprisingly fantastic. So ganache has been made, the dough had proofed completely. I separated it into 2 portions. Spoiler alert, there is another donut coming up soon. But then I entered the danger zone in my kitchen by filling a large pan about 3/4 or half to 3/4 of the way up with vegetable oil, and then heating that up to between 140 and 160 degrees. And unless you've got a larger pot or vessel, or you're making smaller donuts, I mean, I seriously do not recommend anyone does this at home. It was sketchy to say the least. But I did it. The donut got fried, and then on to putting the filling in, which I have to use a piping bag. And if anyone's ever seen the French fancy video that I did, literally right at the beginning, my first video, I absolutely messed up how to pipe things in a piping bag. So I learned from my mistakes and did it a bit better this time, thankfully. So ganache goes in and sugar goes on top, and that's it. That's how you make a donut. Obviously the ganache was by far the best choice I've ever made in my life, because look at that. That is fantastic. Could you imagine if you don't get that kind of spill just with normal Nutella? You'd be fuming. So after a quick weigh, just under 1 kilogram, it is by far the chocolatiest and the biggest donut I've ever tried in my entire life. And it hit the spot perfectly. The crumpet, the thought was there, the process was there, the execution just wasn't exactly how we wanted it, and let me show you why. But first, just in case you are from Mars and you don't know what a crumpet is, let me show you what these round buttery discs of heaven are made from. So I followed like a 2-stage fermenting method, which I saw you just mix all the dry ingredients together, which are strong white bread flour, yeast and caster sugar. Warm up some milk to about 40 degrees and mix them together whilst dropping your camera. Now, dropping your camera is a vital part of the recipe that I'm following, so if you are doing it like me, make sure that you do that well. But once they are mixed, you then just put them in sort of an oil bowl to rise. As the crumpet dough is almost proofed, you want to warm up some more milk, 210 milliliters in this case, up to about 40 to 60 degrees. Add some salt into this milk and then combine that with the now risen dough. So let's whip this tea towel off and show you my holy crumpet dough, which we're now just going to peel off the sides because I didn't oil the thing up as well as I should have done. And as aforementioned, combine the now salted milk to it, weirdly enough. Add a bit of water and mix that fella together. Once that's done, we're now into the second proofing stage. So grab your tea towel back, bung it over, set it to rest for another half an hour or so, and look at him there all bubbling away. At this stage, we sprinkle over 2 tablespoons of baking powder and then lightly sort of coerce them together. It does look a bit rough, but this is sped up. So now we enter the problem zone. What you're meant to do normally with crumpets is find yourself a metal ring and then oil it up, put it onto a frying pan, obviously put a light bit of crumpet dough in there, let the bubbles rise through, which then creates that standard sort of crumpet look which you're used to. Obviously the bubbly top, which allow all the butter to soak through, and a browned bottom. Now all I could find is a sort of snap ring cake tin that would be big enough to make a giant crumpet, which I used, but unfortunately filled it up at the same time. I probably should have done about halfway through because it was too thick, so the bottom got absolutely scorched, as you can imagine. As you see, the bubbles are coming up through the top, as they should do, but because it's so thick, it didn't have enough time before the bottom started burning. So I then decided to waz him into the grill, which unfortunately stopped all of the bubbles coming up, so it does look a bit just like a slab of cooked dough, but it did taste like a crumpet, I'll give you that. Obviously apart from the absolutely charred bottom. I mean, in theory I probably should have just redone it at half the size, but obviously baking things at an astronomical scale is quite expensive, so take this as a lesson of what not to do, courtesy of me. So I've put this one on the subs bench and I will revisit it in a couple of weeks or something and hopefully show you what to do. If you've ever seen The Simpsons before, this donut will be iconic to you. It's Donut Week 2.0. And here is the pink iced ring donut. If you've seen the Nutella donut video that I made, you'll know that I made too much donut dough and I back pocketed this video for a later week, hence now. But if you hadn't seen that video, then I will just very quickly recap on how I made my donut dough, just so you are fully in the loop. Obviously, as per usual, when it comes to baking, you get your dry ingredients in a bowl and then you get your wet ingredients and then you combine them together. So in the dry ingredients bowl, we had strong white bread flour, sugar, salt and instant yeast. I then warmed up 320 milliliters of water with 120 grams of butter inside it, added 4 large free-range eggs, give that a tossle to make a dough. Once that is all combined together, put that into a well-oiled bowl and allow it to rise for about 60 to 90 minutes. And once that dough had risen, I then separated it into 2 forms, obviously the Nutella one, and now I've shaped this one into a ring donut, placed it into a vat of scalding hot oil, and this is where we begin our donut fry. Now the main difference here between the Nutella donut and what we're doing now, and probably the driving factor to why in my opinion this one turned out 10 times better, is with the Nutella donut we put it into 165-ish degree oil to cook, because that's what you do with normal donuts. However, what did happen was it browned too much on the outside and the very center of the donut wasn't quite exactly where we wanted it to be. So I allowed the oil to sort of simmer at about 100 degrees, put the donut in, which then obviously dropped the temperature, and then let it rise up with the donut inside it, allowing it to sort of heat slower, cook slower, and make sure that middle was nice and fluffy throughout. And the results clearly speak for themselves. So obviously it was the better plan of action. Fortunately as well, obviously because it is at a lower temperature, the oil was far less aggressive whilst maneuvering the donut around, so like flipping it over and taking it out, etc. So we landed ourselves a technique which obviously cooked the donut a damn sight better, and I got less sort of splatters, etc. of burning hot oil, which, you know, I consider a complete win. The only downside that you do get here is naturally by dropping the cooking temperature, it does take a little bit longer to get that cooked perfect. But it is browned on the top, it is now browned on the bottom, and it is time to take this fella out and put it onto a drying rack. So carefully does it, and away we go. Now obviously he's going to need to sit on the drying rack for a minute, so we might as well crack on with the icing, the covering. The infamous pink iced coating, which once again, fortunately enough, is fairly simple. So I sifted myself around 250 grams of icing sugar into a bowl, and then added a splash of milk to sort of thicken the glaze, as well as some pink gel colouring to obviously give it that infamous sort of colour. Then we give it a good arm aching whisk to get all of the powdered sugar off the sides of the bowl, get it all sort of combined and naturally as thick as possible so it can coat the donut. Decant the icing from the larger bowl to a smaller one, as we do realise that it probably would be more logical to have the larger bowl underneath the donut to catch all of the falling icing. Realise that the icing that I made just isn't quite thick enough, so put some more icing sugar in there to thicken it up, and now we have something suitable of coating. Now whether that thinner layer of icing beforehand actually made the donut more succulent, or whether it was just a very good sort of fry and cook, I'm not entirely sure, but we will go with it. We'll go with the fact that it helped a ton. So much like a painter and decorator coming to the end of his shift on a Friday, I gave it a very quick thin coat, slapped on a thick coat right at the end afterwards, and then just let it drip, let it finish, and left it to do its thing. Again, much like a painter and decorator, I then had a quick tidy up around the place and realised that I've missed a few bits, and obviously another coat was needed, as well as obviously polishing it up with some final touches. In my case, the sprinkles. Well, hundreds and thousands as I used to call them. I don't know what you call them. Rainbow sprinkles these were called, but either way, it is the final touch to our Simpsons-esque pink iced ring donut, or giant Simpsons-esque pink iced ring donut, I probably should say. And after a painstakingly long time of letting this sort of do its thing and drip and dry, I was then able to transfer it from my makeshift drying rack onto my chopping board, where we can see it in its entire glory. Chuck it onto the scales quickly to have a look at the whopping 1.088 kilograms that this donut does weigh, and fortunately, due to my slow fry, It is perfectly cooked, fluffy all the way through, which if I'm not mistaken is exactly how we need our donuts cooked. So I'll treat myself to a quick nibble and then say, that was my pink ice ring donut. Which one did you prefer, this one or the Nutella? Do subscribe and check the magic out next week.